Hello and greetings again. Welcome back to week two of World Regional Geography. We've made it through one typical cycle of one of my weeks, and hopefully we're beginning to lock into a rhythm regarding the way we do things here. World's getting complicated. Right? The world is getting complicated out there. I mean, have you ever tried opening up a trash bag? Your typical kitchen trash bag, it's next to impossible, right? Next to impossible to find the slits to open them. Recently, my wife brought some home, and lo and behold, they just opened right up. There were no games. It was that simple. Um, yeah, I was just so happy. I can't tell you how happy I was. But I was thinking it shouldn't be that difficult. It really shouldn't be that difficult. We experience it all over. We experience it online, right? We all know that. In order to get to certain places on a page, your average learning management system has just veritable mazes on there. Dashboards today in a car look like something right out of a deck on a Star Trek episode. One needs a veritable crash course uh, from the dealer to figure out where things are. So, leaving many of us um, to sarcastically respond and ask the question, no, we can't do that because that would just make too much sense, right? And the same principle applies at global levels as well. I'm thinking now of the immigration problem. Why do folks flood to the West? Is it because folks are leaving good economies and desire really good ones? No. Well, the latter may be true to an extent, but the countries folks are leaving are economic and political toilets generally. So, how much pressure do we here in the West, the United States, put on these countries to kind of get their act together, right? Get their act together so they're not pushing people out of their countries. But that might just make too much sense, correct? So in this chapter, we're going to see, among several concepts, some of the structural issues that make for political and um, economical stable countries. Okay, so let's take a look at the objectives and the roadmap to where we're going to go here in this chapter two. We're going to recognize key components of population. We're going to discover elements of economic geography, relate the various cultural practices that shape the world's cultural mosaic. Some of the major heads up terms here that I'm going to be stopping and dwelling on. Human development is pretty much just as it sounds, right? Process of enhancing human development. Your birth rate, number of live births per 1,000 inhabitants in a given year. Class, hear about that a lot. Class. This is imposed stratifications of the society. Demography. Demography is the study of population, and you can study population in several different ways. We are going to look at it here through one prism, and that is population per unit of the actual land you can use, cultivable land. Okay. The demographic transition, that's stages of birth and death rates. The age and sex diagrams, uh, these are basically compositions of a nation's population, or otherwise known as population pyramids. I'll have you guys look at those. Nation and a country. What's the difference? A nation is the actual ethnic makeup of the country. The country is made up of your political boundaries, and that does sound like a good quiz question. NGOs, another word for that would be um, non-governmental, lost my train of thought there, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, basically private voluntary organizations. Multinational corporations, these are international service jobs. Economic geography, this is the impact of folks' decisions on resource usage, on resource distribution of them as well, hence the production of wealth or poverty. Tertiary production, this can range from banking to retail to transportation, and we're talking here about your service industry. Free market capitalism, this is where the consumers and the producers, you and me, right? We determine what gets produced, how much of it, when. Flip that around to central planning. Central planning, just the opposite. Some of your more hardcore socialist slash communist regimes, their government ministers determine those economic questions of what gets produced, for whom, how much, and when. Okay. Universal global religions. These are religions that are open to anyone. You don't have to belong to a tribe or an ethnic group. Right? And you have proselytizing that goes on uh, around the globe, since it's not you know, structured toward, again, those tribes or an ethnic groups, open to everyone. Structural adjustment. I'm going to dwell on this in video as well. This is the production of export goods. Reducing tariffs, privatizing, uh, cutting government corruption and its interest in balanced budgets. Formal and informal economies. Part of an economy that is not monitored. That would be an informal economy. It's not monitored. You see this more in third world countries, developing countries. No formal, paychecks with taxes being taken out. Okay. Uh, so by any form of government, right? No tax collections. All right, there you have that. And I think we're ready to dive in. Take a look at population first on your lecture models. Population is population per unit of cultivable land, the land you can use, right? Population resource ratio is resources to population. 29% of the earth is land, and not much of that is inhabitable. Okay, it's a surprise to hear, but that is the fact. Over the next 50 years, 97% of the world's growth will be in densely populated and poor countries. Half of the world's population is connected in urban areas. For example, 35% in India and China. Think about that. Demography. Demography is the study of population structure and change. Birth rates. This is the number of live births per 1,000 inhabitants per year in a given population. Infant mortality, deaths per 1,000 births in the first year of life. Demographic transition. The demographic transition, theoretical model of stages. That relates birth and death rates to social and economic circumstances. If you turn to figure 2.5 on page 48, you can see the stages there. Stage 1 is not a good one. Stage 1, high birth rates and death rates in a pre-industrial society. Stage 2, death rates fall, birth rates are high, reminiscent of an early industrial society. Rapid population increases. Stage 3, rapid population increase, giving way to lower birth rates in developed and an industrial society. Stage 4, low birth rates, low death rates, slow population growth. That is where we are here in the West. And how they tabulate your natural increase is you take the birth rates, right? How many, as we talked about earlier, how many live births per 1,000 people, and your death rates um, is different from infant mortality rates. Death rates, how many people are dying out of 1,000 people. Here in the United States, it's 18 births per 1,000 people. And we have about 6 deaths out of 1,000. You subtract that, you have 12 out of 1,000 for a percentage of 1.2%. And if populations are growing at 1.2%, they will double after 70 years, right? So our population doubles around 70 years because of that rate of natural increase. More developed countries will get into this. More developing countries and third world countries have higher population rates, and some of those are growing at 2% a year, and that would mean your population is going to double in about 35 years. Population doubling time. Migration is long-term movement of people into or out of a place. 100 by, I guess it was 2015. That's the year I wanted. 2015. There were 244 million people living outside of the country of their birth. That's about 3.3% of the world's population. First set of notes here, outside of the fill in the blanks. The composition and history of a country's population is often summarized in an age-sex diagram, or otherwise known as population pyramids. You can turn to page 49, and you will see a set of those. You have one for Papua New Guinea, one for the United States, and yeah, one for the United States. And you'll see projections there for the United States. You'll see population pyramid from 1980, 2010, and projected for 2025. On each side of the pyramid, you'll see it broken down males and females. And as you go up vertically, you can see the pyramid in connection to age brackets. Okay. And then figure 223 at the top. You can see a nice inset map there, the percentage of population of people 65 and older around the globe, and you have your colored key there. And you could read your caption there on figure 224 on your own study time. Okay? Population pyramids. Back in, this was 1798, British economist Thomas Malthus. Malthus predicted that population growth would eventually come to a place where it's going to outpace food production. Now, that hasn't happened. Malthus didn't foresee modern technology, but we're not done, right? We're not done here. So another element I want to start talking about now is governments and political movements. The country is rarely, if ever, the same as a nation. The nation, we talk about a nation, we're talking about an imagined country, right? An imagined country or a politicized ethnic group where folks really believe themselves to share a common culture, common cultural features linked to a specific area of land. Nationalism is a desire of a nation to have its own self-governing country, right? Right now, nationalism, the term is under assault. Some people say it's just patriotism. Others are saying, oh, well, it's, what, you know, spearheaded Hitler and Japan and World War II, right? So multinational corporations, we hear a lot about these multinational, but a lot of people don't know what they are. Multinational corporations, what they do is they move services abroad. They move services abroad. Stuff like tourism. They're interested in tourism. 40% of the service jobs, 40% of these service jobs are tourism, uh, things like that, data processing. I'm trying to think of some other things here: data processing, banking, insurance business, right? Not necessarily manufacturing, I guess is the picture I'm trying to paint here. NGOs, NGOs are non-governmental organizations. They're private voluntary organizations. They're collective, non-commercial activity they believe in. Some examples of that would be Red Cross, Greenpeace, Doctors Without Borders. Then you have country groupings for trade or defense. Country groupings for trade or defense. For example, GATT, the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. NAFTA, right? NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, right, between Mexico, United States, and Canada. And NATO, right? NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, right, was a grouping, Cold War grouping, designed to keep the Soviet Union in check. I think Charter 5 of it was, you attack one of us, you attack all of us. And all three of these were under assault by former President Trump. GATT was under assault because of looked like just really bad trade deals, unfair trade deals the United States was getting. Same thing with NAFTA, and NATO was under assault because the United States was basically paying at least the lion's share of the costs. And the former president was saying, things like, we're not the world's piggy bank, and got to end, right? Start turning our attention now to economic geography. Economic geography studies the impact of people and their decisions on the distribution of resource usage, flows of capital, and human production of material wealth and poverty. Figure 222 on page 54, I believe, has, yes, a map there. And an interesting map, major income groups of countries, and in terms of, you know, its wealth, you can see, again, you can see the colored keys, and you can see, and we'll get to Africa, sub-Saharan Africa in the middle of the course, but you can see that is not doing as well as most of the rest of the world. Page 55, I will be pointing these charts out um, on occasions. I like them. It gives you a chart of consumer goods and water access and energy use. It'll compare the United States to other countries. Out of 1,000 people, who owns cars, who has a computer, right? Who has running water? So check that out. Check page 54 and 55 out, especially for you visual learners. Economic geography, what it does is it studies the impact of people and their decisions on the distribution of resource usage, the flow of capital, human production of material wealth and poverty. I'm kind of emphasizing that again because um, it encompasses the next three points I'm going to make. And if you kind of understand that, it clears up a kind of a big question in the world today. You know, why are some people poor and why are some wealthy? And I would strongly recommend that if you think that because one nation is wealthy and another nation's poor, that it's a zero sum game, I would strongly encourage you to maybe we get done with these points. I won't have to encourage you; you'll see it. But I would encourage people to readjust their thinking on that. Um, Economic development is commonly measured by GDP. You hear that a lot. GDP, your gross domestic product. And what we're talking about there is the total value of goods and services produced within a country in 1 year. Then the GNI which adds foreign transactions to that, to the GDP. And as I say here, they may not reflect comparable costs of living in a country. The purchasing power parity index, or the PPP, purchasing power parity index, PPP, that's basically estimates of the GNI and the GDP, and I think is a more accurate comparison of cost of living among countries, where it measures exchange rates against the U.S. dollar. You can also, if you're so inclined, and if you're interested, Google the Big Mac Index, and the Big Mac Index will give you a, you know, ready-made index on exchange rates as well. I like this one too, the HPI, the Human Poverty Index, and that measures the needs of the poorest countries. It finds a balance between individual poverty and public provision. And again, if you take a look at the chart on page 55, you can see nations like Kenya, right? How many cars they have out of 1,000 people compared to the United States. And this is part of your paper too. I'll get to that a little bit later too. Part of your term paper. I want you to see that um, around the globe there are reasons. There are for reasons why some people are just utterly poor, and there's other countries with great standards of living. It's not that anyone's purposely taking anything from anyone. It's a lot of it is just bad government mismanagement in certain places. Tertiary production. Tertiary production. Service industries. Talked about at the top of this. Service industries from government mandates through the manufacturing sector will provide health services, education, and this includes private sector initiatives and initiated retail and wholesale trade, finance, legal, media, and informational technology. Free market capitalism, jumping ahead here, free market capitalism entails economic decisions, making capacities of individuals making purchases of goods. Advertisers create the wants in a free market economy with the goal to make profits. Competition ensues as a result nationally and internationally. Um, theoretically, governments regulate trade and fair business practices. You have lobbyists. Lobbyists, however, influence legislatures, your lawmakers, and then you have taxes and tariffs that are also a reality. Your central planning. Central planning is where your central ministers do the planning and decide on the economic question of how much one gets produced, what and when it gets produced, and how much of it and for whom. Central planners are often out of touch with the needs of the hinterland, resulting in over and underproduction. This is one of the many things that killed the Soviet Union. There's often a gap between the government elites and the general populace. I can guarantee you that the government ministers in Kenya are not hard up for eating, right? And having, the finer things of life. In 1978, China began encouraging investment by private companies outside of China. Kind of led to the economic growth that they have today, providing or including free market economic structures to their economy. Multinational corporations make goods or services for profits in several countries, but have a headquarters in one country, right? Coca-Cola, all over the globe, headquartered in Atlanta. Making our way to cultural geography, marching our way through the chapter. You have universal or global religions. Universal or global religions can be joined by anyone. Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism, right? Three major universal religions. Class. Class arises from stratification of society that has imposed religious, economic, or some kind of social criteria. Wealth, education, and birthright are common class distinctions around the globe as well. The education and status of women. Education not only gives women confidence, but enlightens them to opportunities and enhances decision making. I think it's now 55 to 60% of all college students today are indeed females. Regional development. Regional development. Human development. Human development is the process of enhancing human capabilities and improving life through such aspects as education, healthcare, and access to adequate clean water and energy supplies. Sustainable human development. Sustainable human development is economic growth that does not damage renewable resources for the future. For instance, down in Brazil, some people would say it's exploitation. Other people would say that it's enhancing standards of living, but utilizing the rainforest, right, to make more baseball bats and pianos and houses. Um, so your sustainable human development would be it's okay to do that, provide jobs, but you know, don't impair, don't impair the and impede any kind of chance to replenish what has been cut down in that area, right? In poor countries, few jobs are in a formal economy. And we talk about formal economy, we're talking about like salaries that are taxed. Um, few people own land or homes in these areas. The majority of the folks in the developing world live in an informal economy, by the way, gaining income, as best as they can. For example, uh, we have lack of property rights. For instance, if you go to Calcutta, you will see, you could see someone rummaging through a pile of trash for wood, and that person is garnering wood to make cabinets, right, to sell them. Now, there's no government there to monitor him and take taxes from him. So, you know, a classic example of an informal economy. Structural adjustment. Structural adjustment uh, is export based. It's export based that limits bureaucracy and government involvement. Countries applying for aid, for instance, should be expected to export manufactured goods and allow foreign investment. Another way to look at that is this: if the United States is giving aid to country X is going to be expected to utilize uh, that cash to take advantage of some resources that they have in their country and specialize in that, and then be able to give back financially or um, uh, structurally with some kind of production to the United States. Lastly, human rights. Human rights emerged in part from revolutions in Europe and the United States that highlighted, quote, liberty and equality. In France during the French Revolution, the American founding fathers were um, paying close attention and developing the Bill of Rights. And this is all found again in the United Nations Declaration of, uh, of Human Rights. Now, not all countries agree on human rights. For example, back during the Cold War, um, the Soviet Union would look at the economic disparities in this country, and they'd say that's not just. That's not just. And we would look at the millions of people heading into gulags for just telling political jokes, um, at least political jokes, or disagreeing with the government. We would rightly say that was that wasn't that was abuses of human rights. The United States view on who sits on the UN Security Council today versus the view of Russia or China. During the Cold War, there was a lot of rhetoric, over this. Communists focused on social and economic rights. Here, civil and political rights. Let's take a look at what's up ahead and um, our graphic organizer. Today we talked about concepts in world geography, and we looked at demography, right? Demography, we looked at birth rates, infant mortality, and the demographic transition. Talked about Thomas Malthus, migration, and the age-sex diagrams. Concepts in world geography is about government and politics, right? A nation's an imagined country or politicized ethnic group. Nationalism, a desire to have one's own self-governing country. We looked at multinational corporations and trade and defense associations and non-governmental organizations, privately owned with a collective bent to collective goals. Economic geography. We talked about the various ways you can measure your economies through the gross domestic product, gross national income, purchasing power parity index, and the human poverty index. Tertiary production, your service sector, ranging from barbers to bankers to international transportation conglomerates. Free market capitalism, where individuals We looked at that. Individuals discern uh, and producers determine what gets produced, how much of it, and when. Central planning, socialist, communist countries, you just inverse that. It's an inverse um, relationship where the government ministers determine those economic questions. Cultural geography, we looked at the importance of religion, universal religions, open to anyone. And then lastly, regional geography, we looked at human development, ways in which you invest in the economy to make it better for the folks. Sustainable human development, use resources, but don't impede their replenishment. Structural adjustment, right, emphasizes the um, you know privatization, less government, less bureaucracy, and that folks receiving aid should be putting back into the international economy. Human rights, right? Depends on whose lens you're looking through. It could be economic rights, could be political, civil rights, and then formal and informal economies. Formal economies, you know, um, pretty much typical of what we have here, right? The traditional, get the paycheck, taxes are taken out, for the government. Informal economies, just the opposite. You see it in developing world, third world countries, folks just kind of going about their, trying to make a living on their own. Could be going through heaps of trash to get metal or wood or something and create something, sell it to the public, and no one's monitoring them or taking taxes out on them, right? Informal economies. Okay, what's up ahead? Have two different types of practice assignments this week. Again, you don't owe them to me, but I would strongly suggest working through those concepts. I'm going to be quizzing off of what I talk about in the lecture models, probably in order to learn those better. Practice with at least one of those assignments. And besides that, you're going to need them for discussion questions too. Videos, I have two short ones. Population geography for you visual, audio visual people. Just a 3 or 4 minute video kind of capsulizing some of what I talked about today. And structural adjustment, right? Structural adjustment, interesting concept. So I have a 2 or 3 minute video on that as well. Your reading is on page 39. I forgot to write that down. It's on page 99%. It's on page 39. 99% sure. Let me go back and look, and it is on, yes, page 39. China's landscapes and global changes. In the news, several options on that in the news Thursday night, and then your initial discussion post will be due Friday night. Cannot respond to anyone else if you do not have the initial posts. Sunday, the 2 response posts are due, and then Monday, a little bit of a twist already here. We have the quiz, chapter 2 quiz. Then we begin. I will have my lecture up for you guys 12:01 on Monday morning, and we'll be looking at Europe. We'll start to zero in on the various continents and regions, accompanied by the obligatory lecture model, right? But here's a little twist. Topic submissions are due. And remember, the topic submissions, you're basically just picking a country. Be sure to look at my chart of, who's taking what, right? If you're looking at the chart and you want Iran and someone else's name is there, go for something else, right? So, because there's so many countries in the world and there's only so many of us, I don't want duplicates. I said this earlier. You guys are kind of doing my dirty work for me. I want to know as much about various countries out there as possible. So no duplicates. So, any questions? Get a hold of me via email. Thursday nights. If you're so interested, we could Zoom. and do a feedback night. More on that too as the course unfolds. So you guys have a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Bye bye.